Okay, by my clock, it's 11:33, so I don't want to delay the start of this webinar. We have a lot of information to cover. Welcome to Bucks County's webinar on New President, New Policies, what employers need to know to protect their business. We have a speaker today that's an employment lawyer, and she has all the latest and greatest info. So before we begin, I just have a couple of housekeeping items for you. First of all, we're recording, so you don't have to take furious notes. You'll get a copy of the recording as well as the slides after the presentation is over. Please hold all of your questions until the end. If you have questions as we go, put them in the Q&A section, and we will address them at the end of the event. So with that being said, I'd like to first of all introduce myself. My name is Linda Zangrilli, and I'm the current chapter chair of Bucks County. And if you'll allow me just a couple of minutes to talk about SCORE and what we do, we always have to add a little commercial to the event. SCORE, if those of you who don't know us, we are a national nonprofit organization. We have some 350 chapters and 13,000 members all over the United States. We have one very, very simple mission, and that is to help small business start, grow, and succeed. We do that through seminars like this. Thanks to COVID, all of our seminars this year have been in this format, and they're free, which is a major bonus. And we do that through free mentoring. Yes, free mentoring. So if you're an entrepreneur who's just starting out and you think you need some help and guidance and how to get off the ground, we're here for you. Visit our website at buckscounty.score.org. And we can help you find a mentor and get that mentor to help you through your journey and help you with your successful launch, if that's the case of your business. Or if you have a business and you feel like you're going nowhere and you need a little push, we can help you with that too. Our members in Bucks County, first of all, we cover the entire county and Eastern Montgomery County. And we have some 75 people in the chapter who come from all walks of life. So they have experience in all business disciplines and can guide you no matter what you're looking for. We are also a resource partner of the Small Business Administration. So we have that organization behind us, and we have lots of resources there as well. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce the man who is our seminar chair, who has put this program together, as well as the monthly and sometimes bi-monthly programs that we're offering. And his name is Ed Torello. And Ed, would you take over from here?
Thank you very much, Linda. And thank you all for joining us for this webinar. As you know, this webinar is one of 35 that we put together for this year, being September to September. And we've already put our program together preliminarily for next year, and we have 40 webinars. So there's a lot of information, and we're building a big library of this stuff, and it's all free. You just have to go on our website that Linda mentioned, and you will be able to get whatever you need. She told you the session is being recorded, so it's easy for you just to pay attention. And you don't have to be writing things down. You'll get a copy immediately afterwards, along with the slides. And also, just to make life easier for all of us, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A, not the chat. It's just easier. And at the end, I will feed the questions to Christina, and we'll go from there. Okay. We're very fortunate to have Christina Reger, who's Esquire, who is a founding partner of the law office of Christina Reger, and she's an employment attorney, which is an excellent specialty for exactly what a lot of our clients need to talk to someone about. She's had over 15 years of experience working with corporate and entrepreneurs and startups, and she's worked a lot in the litigation area, the compliance area, and what to do with that employee. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to Christina, and she's going to give her presentation. Christina?
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Linda. It's always a pleasure to work with SCORE and SCORE's members. I have served and worked with so many of the members of SCORE, and it's always a pleasure to be here and help in any way that I can. Running a business is challenging, and new challenges happen every day. And I can say without a doubt that most business owners really have the best interests at heart. They want to do things right, but there's just so many laws out there and so many regulations. And so I'm here to kind of digest some of that for you in terms of the new president and the new policies and what that means for a small business owner. So with that being said, we're going to cover a lot of topics. I'm just going to cover them generally. It's not legal advice, and I'm not creating any attorney-client privilege, but I will answer your questions as best I can. So if you have questions, like Linda and Ed both said, put them in the Q&A. Put them in the Q&A at the time I'm covering that topic, because we're going to cover a lot of topics. And to the extent that I can answer them at the time that that topic is being covered, I'd prefer to do that. If you have questions about COVID or the vaccine, they are not being covered in this presentation, but put them in the Q&A anyway, because if there's time at the end, I'm happy to answer those questions. I still get those questions every single day. So to the extent that you have questions about COVID or the vaccine or vaccine policies or mandating vaccines, I'm happy to have discussion on that at the end if there's time left over. Okay, so with that being said, here's just a quick agenda of some of the things we're going to cover. We're going to talk about 2021 and the new perspective and what that means for a business owner, because there are some significant perspectives that we need to make sure that you're all aware of. We're going to talk about unemployment updates. We're going to talk about the latest with OSHA. We're going to talk about the DOL and the overtime rules, which I feel like I talked about. I feel like it's Groundhog's Day. I talked about them 4 years ago. We're going to talk about redefining, what I call redefining the workplace 2021. We're going to talk about the Philly wage tax, and we're going to talk about having all of this information, what you as business owners and employers should do. So let's get started. 2021, a new perspective. What that means to you, the business owner, is that you have a Democratic president in the White House and you have a Democratic Congress. Now, I'm trying to work 3 screens all at the same time. I am not here to talk about politics, not in the least bit. But as a business owner, you need to understand what this means for you. And it is this: Democratic philosophies are pro-employee. Republican philosophies are pro-employer. So when you look at presidents, you look at Donald Trump, the president that just left the White House, and all of his policies focused on things that were pro-business. So when he came into office, he cut the corporate tax rates. He encouraged independent contractors and the gig economy. He put the kibosh on the raising of the exemption threshold on which employers should pay overtime. That was under the Obama years. Now, under the Donald Trump years, that kind of got pushed aside, and there was this encouraging of entrepreneurship and independent contractors and the gig economy. So that's what a Republican philosophy is. A Democratic philosophy is pro-employee. So what that means for you, the business owner, is you have leadership right now that is pro-employee and not pro-employer. And that means that you as a business owner need to be protected. You need to make sure your policies are up to date. You need to make sure you're complying with all the regulations and rules. You need to make sure your people are classified correctly, because what you're going to see in the next 4 years is you're going to see renewed interest in unions. And I think I've been seeing some articles come out about Kamala Harris's really focus on union and how good unions are. But keep in mind, unions are a pro-employee concept. They're there to protect the employees. The other big thing that's significant with these different philosophies is that like I have in the corner, the NLRB and the Department of Labor, those two federal agencies were created to protect the rights of the employee. So under the Obama years, the 8 years of the Obama presidency, those agencies became very well funded and grew significantly in size. You saw a lot of class actions. You saw a lot of activity with respect to misclassified employees, wage and hour claims under the Trump administration. And I remember this, the first 2 months when he came into office and he submitted his budget, those agencies were slashed significantly because he's pro-employer. So he did not fund those agencies. So what I think you're going to see in my little employment law crystal ball is that those agencies will again be well funded. And you're going to see this focus on this gig economy and whether that's going to continue to grow or whether that's going to shrink as democratic philosophies focus on people should be employees. They should have all the benefits of being an employee, as opposed to a gig worker who doesn't get unemployment, doesn't get workers' comp, doesn't get all the benefits that go along with being an employee. And so what you also may see is more misclassification claims. And the other thing that I put on here was social media monitoring. Back 4 years ago, the National Labor Relations Board, which traditionally focused on union activity, protecting unionizing, also took this interest on social media and employees' rights to post on social media, even if they blasted their employer. And if the employee put something on social media, as horrendous as it may have been, that blasted an employer's terms of employment, like, I can't believe he made me work overtime during a snowstorm, and the employee got fired, the National Labor Relations Board was stepping in and saying, you can't fire that employee for speaking about the terms and conditions of their employment. And the reason that was significant was because for the first time ever, you saw this agency going into shops and to employers that were non-union shops and saying, we have a right to look at this too, even though this isn't a union employer. So the question is whether that will grow again and whether that focus will come back. Okay, so let's, hold on. Okay. So the next big topic that I want to cover, which I know all of you have dealt with in the past year, is unemployment. This has become quite an issue for many employers, and I know it's still a struggle every single day. And if I don't get at least one call a day that says, I can't get my people back to work, what do I do? There's been a lot going on in the employment world. And so the latest with unemployment is that in Pennsylvania, at least beginning just a couple of weeks ago, the unemployment office, the Department of Labor and Industry, launched a brandy new website. And so I think what you're going to see is a lot of elimination of paper, those paper decisions that you used to get, and the paper, determinations that an employee is eligible for unemployment because they filed. That's going away. So to the extent that you have employees, you should really check out this new portal and make sure that you're registered, because that's where eventually, and I don't know how quickly this is happening for them, but eventually you're going to start getting notices. What I am seeing is that I did get a call just the other day about an employer who got a notice from something that was resolved like a year and a half ago. And I said, just for now, just ignore it. I think it's just them uploading their history and their historical data. So you might get some hiccups that way as well. But the new online system has step-by-step guides. I was kind of on there fishing around yesterday, and it also has a lot of resources for business owners. A big announcement that came out is the work requirements, meaning that an employee's requirement to search for work is coming back this week. So now, if you are on unemployment, you must start looking for jobs, and you must show proof that you're looking for jobs. That has not happened for the past year. That requirement was waived during the pandemic, and that is coming back. So that may be a little bit of a push to get people back to work. Hearings, however, because I just did one the other day, remain virtual for the most part. What they're saying to participants in an appeal hearing is that you can have it virtual, we'll do it today, or you can opt to have it in person, but it may be many months until you get your hearing. And so that's their way of discouraging businesses from having in-person hearings. The extended benefits ended on May 15th, 2021 in Pennsylvania, and those that are still filing for the extended benefits beyond the 24 weeks, I think it is, were transitioned to the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation Act, the PEUC. So that extension of time is gone, thank God, because that was another onus. Now, the other kind of piece to this puzzle is that there is still a significant number of people, and I also hear this every single day, that say, I call my people back and they're not coming back. How do I get my people to come back to work? They're making more on unemployment than they are coming back to work. That is absolutely true for some employers. But just a few weeks ago, the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry put out this form, and the website is there, so you can link to it when you get the slides. And essentially what they've said is that this is not an option. It's an obligation of the employer, whether they're calling someone back to work and the employee doesn't come back, or I get this a lot too. They say they're coming back and then they don't show up. Or what you may now see now with this obligation of employees to look for 2 jobs is they may accept your job and then not show up. In either case, you as the employer are obligated to take this form and submit it, because if they are eligible for suitable work, they are no longer eligible for unemployment. And so while there is probably such a backlog, I cannot even imagine at the unemployment office, I think that this is just another way that employers can start to put the curb on that and get people back to work. I actually had one employer that has put in their offer letters, please sign this offer letter accepting this. If you refuse this offer letter, or this position, we will report you essentially to the unemployment office as we have made an offer of suitable work for you, or something along those lines. So again, employers really trying to take steps to get people to work because they really need people. And I'm sure that you've all experienced this, whether in your own business or standing in lines on the weekend at different merchants, as they are all short-staffed. Okay. I don't see any questions on unemployment, so I'm going to move past unemployment. I filled out this form. I do see one comment. I filled out this form, but both employees still got unemployment and are still on unemployment. So Donna, I think that's just a backlog, and I think what you're going to see is they may still be on it, but they're going to recoup it on the back end. So I've heard that before, but I think I'm still encouraging employers to fill it out. Try the portal. I'm curious to see what luck you have with that and if you get a quicker response using the portal. Okay. So OSHA has been also very busy over the past couple months. They've issued a lot of guidance. The thing about OSHA guidance is that it's guidance. It's not binding law, but there is a requirement and that from employers that employers have an obligation to keep employees safe. And under the OSHA Act, which is a law, employers are responsible for providing a safe and healthy workplace free from hazards. So that is a law. So OSHA has said, okay, this is the law. This is what employers have to comply with. So we're going to give you guidance to help you comply with that. So they issued extensive guidance on January 29th. With 15 kind of steps that employers should take. And then the CDC issued recommendations for fully vaccinated people regarding their lack of requirement, I guess, or no longer requiring them to wear masks if they're fully vaccinated. And then OSHA took their guidance down and said, we're reevaluating our guidance based on the new recommendations from the CDC. So just very recently on June 10th, OSHA published new guidance. And basically it focused on two things. It focused on protections for the unvaccinated or other at-risk workers, so those that can't get vaccinated for one reason or another. And it focused on employers encouraging COVID vaccinations for their employees. And so again, going back to that concept of keeping employees safe, their focus now is on the most vulnerable employees, the ones that you have to keep safe because they're not vaccinated and they're at a higher risk. So there was kind of like a checklist on this new guidance that was very similar to the January guidance, but just more focused on those that are unvaccinated, which is to grant PTO to get people vaccinated. And there still is that Family First Coronavirus Act legislation that was the first piece of legislation that came out when the pandemic struck last March, that was amended as part of the America Rescue Plan that Biden put into place and allowed for time off to get your vaccine. So what I have been telling employers is, number one, employees do not want to take their own PTO time to get vaccinated or to deal with the repercussions if they're not feeling well from their vaccination. So give them FFCRA leave. It's completely 100% tax deductible to you, the employer. It's a huge job satisfier to the employee because they know they're not going into their PTO time to get vaccinated. And you, the employer, can report it through your accountant when you do your taxes as FFCRA leave. And while you pay that leave, it becomes a tax credit for you. Stacy, I'll get to that question about vaccines. Stay at home if you're sick or exposed, physically distancing for unvaccinated. So this is nothing new. I mean, this is all of the things that all of us had to do, which still continue to apply. But as an employer, if you have people in your workforce that are not vaccinated, you need to continue to offer these things. Now, I just did revised a policy this morning for an employer that we had done a pandemic COVID policy for. And given the new state requirements that nobody is really necessarily required to wear a mask, in the policy that we created, we stated something like, while masks are not required, employees are permitted and encouraged to wear masks if they are not vaccinated or feel that they need to, or are at some kind of health risk. So that's the kind of policy that an employer should put in place. You still need to, under OSHA, record infections and deaths and protect against retaliation. So this is kind of the new guidance that OSHA has put out. Now here, and to Stacy's question, which says, can an employer legally ask if the employee is vaccinated? If so, can they be separated from others or treated differently? Well, that's a loaded question a little bit. Can they ask if they're vaccinated? Yes. Can they ask for proof of vaccination? Yes. Can they ask for a copy of the card, the little golden ticket card? Yes. However, I encourage all of my employers not to ask for a copy of the card, because that is a medical record. And then you have to comply with the medical records requirements and maintain that in a separate locked file with all of the employee's other medical records. So if you don't want that additional obligation, you can ask to see it, but you don't need a copy of it. If you're requiring the vaccine under OSHA, and I actually just spoke to my contact at OSHA last week about this, you may have to record and report adverse reactions to the vaccine if you have employees that have them. There's frequently asked questions on OSHA, and I encourage you to go on them because that may change, because obviously that's a disincentive for now an employer to mandate vaccines because they don't want to report if there's an issue. But if you just encourage vaccines, you don't have to report. If you mandate, you do. So that's kind of where we are. But then OSHA made another statement that said they won't enforce an employer's requirements to record up until May of 2022. So there's a little bit of varying information out there. So that's why I put the frequently asked questions in there, because they tend to get updated very quickly. So we are required to ask customers if they are vaccinated. Customers is a little bit different, Kim. I don't know that you're allowed to ask customers. I don't know that I would go that far. I think you might have a little bit more of a sticky wicket with that concern. But you can post a sign. I'm thinking out loud. You can post a sign at your business that says, if you are not vaccinated, I actually have a client that did this. She put a basket by the front door that said, here's a mask for you to wear. But again, if your people are vaccinated, then they should be safe. But if your people or you are not vaccinated, then somebody coming in that's not vaccinated could be a risk to you. In which case, then you have that policy about your employees being vaccinated. Jeff Michael, hi Jeff. What risk does the employer face if the company owner does not believe in masks and the new rule? So there's always, this has been a challenge. I actually had another client that said, none of my people are vaccinated. They believe that they're strong and healthy and young, and if they get it, they're not going to get it that bad. I think that an owner may face an issue with OSHA or an OSHA claim. I actually did have an employer that did face an OSHA investigation, and it was just a reporting that they received a letter from OSHA saying, we've received a report from one of your employees that they don't feel safe at work and that you're not abiding by masking requirements. This was back in January before anything was lifted. And they had to respond to OSHA and prove that they had complied with the CDC guidelines regarding keeping their employees safe, because OSHA definitely does follow what the CDC recommends. So now that all of these masking requirements are lifted, I don't think an employer faces as much of a liability, because there really isn't any requirements on the state or federal level that are mandating masks. Another question, if you require the vaccine and employees will not take it, what can you do? Do you have to offer work at home options? So this goes kind of back a little bit to your first question, Stacy, which I didn't get to yet, which is, here's the rub with the vaccine. And that is that if you have employees that don't get the vaccine for whatever reason, and you ask them why, which you can do under the pandemic rules, you need to be prepared that if they give you a reason, like a religious reason or a disability reason, like I'm pregnant, or I have an autoimmune disease and my doctor doesn't recommend that I get the vaccine, you must accommodate them, provided that it doesn't cause an undue burden. It's no different than any other accommodation process that you need to go through when an employee asks for a reasonable accommodation. You have to go through that interactive process. If you ask why, you get one of those answers, you have to go through that interactive process. If you get, I just don't believe in vaccines, as an employer, if you're mandating, you have the right to let that person go. There's been a lot of questions about that. There was a case out in the federal courts of Texas where a judge decided that letting employees go because of their refusal to get the vaccine for a non-protected reason, which is not a religious or health reason, was upheld. So it was the only court right now that's made that decision, but it did make national news. So we'll see. That's the only guidance that we as lawyers have right now. Can you offer work at home options? You can, if your business allows you to do that. I think employers' refusal to offer work at home options now, post-COVID, will be extremely difficult if those people worked at home before, because when it was convenient for the employer and the employer was doing everything to survive, the employers offered work at home. To come back now post-pandemic and say, well, we don't let our people work from home, it's really going to be a stretch. It's going to be a really uphill argument for an employer to make. Let's see. Does asking an employee about their vaccine status violate the HIPAA rights? No, they are in a pandemic. The rights of HIPAA related to vaccinations are waived. And there's EEOC Q&As and Department of Labor Q&As that specifically address how asking questions, taking temperatures, asking about health related to COVID symptoms, and asking for vaccine information is not a violation of HIPAA, but asking somebody if they've had a vaccine is in and of itself not a medical question. So that's what the guidance has said on the federal level. Is there a reasonable time that an employee will be paid for adverse vaccination reactions? I've seen a day or two. That's not to say that people haven't had more, but as an employer, you can ask for a doctor's note. There's nothing that says you can't. So if somebody's going on a week, ask for a doctor's note and say, it's within your right to, at this point, say, hey, I'd like a doctor's note that says you're okay to come back to work if it's been a week, because that just hasn't been on record as the kind of standard of amount of time that somebody would get an adverse reaction. Okay. I think I got them all. I knew I'd get a lot of vaccine questions, but I'm happy to answer them. So let's go. We have one more OSHA slide. What OSHA did issue in March was that they were going to prioritize inspections, perform on-site inspections, address violations of OSHA standards, and investigate referrals and complaints received. So they've been really quiet through the pandemic insofar as doing enforcement, but this came out in March saying they were going to do that. And back to Jeff's point, that is what my client got, but they didn't have an on-site inspection. They just got a letter, and they were required to show what actions they had been taking to keep their employees safe. It was essentially the gist of the letter. Okay. So we're going to move on. I don't see any more questions on the OSHA vaccine front, but I'm happy to answer more if there are. We're going to talk about employee misclassification, because I suspect that this will be the next big topic. Again, remember 4 years ago, the Department of Labor was really, really big on employee misclassification as it related to salaried versus hourly and employee versus independent contractor. And I think you're going to see more and more of these types of claims as the Department of Labor kind of becomes more built up. It's growing again in size. As all of you, I'm sure, know, the Fair Labor Standards Act is the federal law that's regulated by the Department of Labor, and the employee's eligibility for overtime is based on whether they are exempt or non-exempt. And I'm sure many of you remember back in 2016 when that threshold upon which an employee could be paid overtime was proposed to be raised from that $23,000 that it still is, up beyond, I think the final proposal was something like 40, in the 40,000 range. So that was hugely significant. And a lot of employers started bumping their people up or reclassifying them in anticipation of that. And then there was a nationwide injunction. And then that was like in Thanksgiving week of 2016. And then Trump came into office, and then there was a kibosh put on that. But in the meantime, what happened was Pennsylvania took action. And they said, we're going to look at both both prongs of this test to determine whether somebody is exempt. There's two prongs. One is, what are their duties or what are their functions? If they are not in one of the what they're called white collar exceptions, what are their duties, to see if they're eligible for overtime, and what is their salary. And Pennsylvania did take action, and that right now in 2020, the salary test was raised, and I didn't really see a lot of this come out, but it's $684 a week or $35,000 a year. So if you have an employee that is being paid less than $35,000 a year and they are salaried, they are misclassified, and they should either be bumped above the 35, or you should be paying them overtime for hours worked over 40. And when Pennsylvania implemented this new legislation, they put it into a 3-tiered effect. So it was 2020, 2021, and 2022. And you can see the numbers proposed for October of 2021 and then October of 2022, where these numbers are going to again increase. So if you have that employee that you're paying a salary and they're under 40,000, come October, you either need to bump them over the 40 to keep them salaried, or if you're keeping them under the 40, you need to be paying them overtime for hours over 40, and then again in 2022. And then I put that potential increase in federal because the federal is really, 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 really low. And I suspect in the next 4 years that there will be another push to increase those numbers at the federal level. But right now, under the state level, they are increased, and businesses in the state of Pennsylvania must comply with the state wage and hour regulations as well. So this is where that hourly versus salary misclassification comes in. And even if you won't see a claim under the federal laws, you could see a claim under the Pennsylvania wage and hour laws, which are just as horrific in terms of, they're entitled to back pay, they're entitled to compensatory damages, they could be entitled to punitive damages, they're entitled to attorney's fees if it's a litigation. It's ugly. But also the other thing that employers really need to look at is they need to look at, are there independent contractors? And I didn't put a separate slide on this, but are there independent contractors truly independent, or are they employees of the company? I think you're going to see another shift like there was 4 years ago in looking at that. I mean, there was such a boom in what they called the gig economy, and I question whether that will continue to grow. And what I have seen as businesses start to open up after the pandemic is exactly that. Businesses are using that gig economy, and they're saying, well, I don't need a full-time HR person, so I'm going to hire ABC company to do my outsourced HR, or ABC company to do my outsourced CFO work, or ABC company because I need additional workers. And so the question becomes, as the businesses start to open back up and they get busy again, whether those people are really independent contractors. If they're a bakery employee that's working for you 40 hours a week or 50 hours a week, they're not independent. And if they're hourly workers, they're not independent. And so I caution all of you as business owners to look at your workforce and look at those people that you have as independent contractors and whether they're truly independent. I can't tell you how many litigations and claims that I've had to defend for businesses that have these people that are working as independent contractors, as lower level hourly workers, and they've been doing it for years. But even if they haven't, and now coming out of the pandemic, if they're lower level hourly workers, they're not independent of you in any way, like they don't have their own business, or they're working for you 50 hours a week or 60 hours a week, they're not independent. And those that are working for you more than 40, those are the ones that the Department of Labor loves to catch, because those people are entitled to overtime. And if they're independent contractors, you're paying them straight time for all those hours. So that's where employers run into trouble with those types of misclassification issues. So do that audit, look at those people. If you have questions, reach out to an employment attorney, reach out to an HR specialist, reach out to me. Make sure that your people are properly defined. Okay, so we're going to go to, so I don't see any questions on that. So we're going to go to the next topic, which is redefining the workplace 2021. And as businesses start to open up, and it's funny because I feel like I did a lot of speaking on this when Pennsylvania moved into the green phase. And now I feel like I'm doing it again because a lot of businesses that, even though they opened in the green phase, they didn't return to the office. And what I'm seeing is end of third quarter is when I see people starting to come back to the offices. But if you have people coming back to the office, what does that look like? Are you doing a hybrid model? If you're using less space, do you have lease considerations? Do you have space give back? Look at your leases, see if there's space that you can give back or that you can sublease if you're not going to have all of your people back into the office. If you're using a hybrid model, what does that look like? If part of your people are now working from home, if they're working from home part of the time, and we'll talk a little bit about that whole piece of working from home on a more permanent basis, because I think that there is legal exposure there as well that just hasn't been tapped into yet, but I see it coming. So the first issue that I see coming, and I actually just had a call on this last week, which is what brought it glaringly to my attention. And so I wanted to talk about it today. And I realize we're a Bucks County score, but I also realize many of you either have businesses in Philly or have people that are working in Philly for you that may live in the outskirts, is this Philly wage tax issue. If you have employees or if you have an office in Philly such that you have employees that are paying that Philly wage tax, if they live in Philly, not such a big deal because they're kind of stuck with it either way. But if they travel into Philly for this wage tax and they worked in Philly and now they don't, there's an issue here that you need to address. And by that, I mean, what the city of Philadelphia has said is in the past, in 2020, they kind of gave a reprieve and they said, if you were working from home in 2020 as a result of the pandemic, your employer can file for a refund of any Philly wage tax that was taken from your pay as a result of you working from home through the pandemic. And if your employer does not do that, you can do that. If you are not linked in with me, please link in with me. If you are linked in with me, check out my articles because I just did an article on this last week with all of the appropriate links to get those refunds. But the more important question comes in is as you redefine your workplace and you start looking at those employees that are now going to either be working from home permanently or in a hybrid type of model, they are only obligated to pay Philly wage tax for the time they are sitting or standing, no pun intended, but yeah, really pun intended, in the city. So if they are working part of the time at home, like every other week, then for those weeks that they're at home, they are not obligated to pay, if provided their home is outside of Philadelphia County, they are not obligated to pay Philly wage tax. But what the city has said is it's up to the individual employer, but the individual employer needs to almost like reclassify or redefine that position as either a telecommuting position or a hybrid type of position. And what does that mean, redefine it? Well, I think it just means updating their job descriptions to say this position is no longer an in-office position and has been recharacterized as a telecommuting position. Employees no longer required to work in our Philadelphia office location. Something that creates a record so that if the Philly wage tax office comes to you, the employer, and says, where's the taxes for these people that used to be working in Philly? How come you didn't collect it? You can say, hey, our offices didn't open until September 30th or October 1 till the fourth quarter. And we classified these 10 positions as now telecommuting positions. And so they no longer have to report to the office, and we no longer collect the tax for them because they are no longer in the city. So I see it as a huge exposure to the extent that Philly's looking for ways to recoup a lot of money that it lost from a variety of things, but Philly wage tax was one of them. And so as they start to look at people coming back, not coming back, it's either going to be a huge dissatisfier on the part of the employee who's now working from home and still gets Philly wage tax taken out in 2021, or on the part of the tax office who says, where's my money for these people? So either way, I say to you as an employer, be proactive, take a look at this, look at your workforce, and make sure that if you are changing where people are working, that you document that and make sure that your people are appropriately working in the right place and that you have a record of that for this Philly wage tax issue. Okay, any questions? I don't see questions on that. Okay. So now you have all of this information and you have all of these new things that came out of COVID and that came out of vaccines and that came out of working from home and all of these potential areas of exposure as you move into 2021 and as you move into kind of bringing everyone back or bringing people back on a hybrid model. What do you have to do? What should you be doing as an employer? And I gave you a checklist. The first thing you should do is really revamp the policies to reflect the new way that you're operating. Take a look at your handbook, look at your policies and how you operate every day. And even if you put like a task force together, include your employees. I've said this throughout the pandemic, make them part of the solution. They have great ideas. But look at how you're operating and see if the policies that you have still fit. And to the extent that you are pulling out your handbook and going, here it is, it's time for a new handbook. A lot has changed in the past several years. And my firm does, I must have at least 5 or 10 on my desk right now. We review handbooks, we write new handbooks, but if your handbook is more than a couple years old, it's really time for a rewrite. If it's gets reviewed every year or every other year, you need to look at it. Because a lot of things that you'll be surprised that there are so many things in your handbook that really don't fit how you're operating right now. But also, when you're looking at revamping policies, look at what worked in 2020. There's a lot of things that worked. A lot of businesses became really tech savvy, and a lot of businesses really learned how to do things very efficiently. And if those things worked, incorporate those things that worked into your new policies. But there are other policies that I really think that as a business owner, you need to look at, and those are your health and safety policies, your reimbursement policies. If you have people that are now going to permanently be working from home, they are saving you money, you, the business owner, particularly if you're in some kind of office where you have real, like office real estate that employee is occupying, and now they're not anymore. Think about the things that they use at the office that now they're drawing on at home that you may need to consider or want to consider whether you reimburse them for. And by that, I mean printers, printer paper, printer cartridges, Wi-Fi, phone. Those are all things that as a business owner, you have at the office for them. But if now they're drawing on their own, it really becomes a dissatisfier really quickly when employees have to start paying for printer cartridges, which are not cheap. Because they're printing a lot at home. So think about those things, which could be a cost savings down the road because you're not paying for that leased space for them anymore. But also you need to look at paid sick leave policies. You need to look at other leave policies, vacation policies, disability policies. I have seen some questions about disability policies, particularly as it relates to vaccines and COVID, and in the very tragic and while it's minority, but very limited scope of some of those people that got COVID and just still haven't recovered. I think they call it long-term COVID. How do you address those issues? Okay. And you should also, as you redefine 2021 workplaces, you need to look at those teleworking policies. And if you don't have them and you have people working at home, you need to create those policies and make sure that they're part of your operating procedures moving forward. And so by that, I mean, looking at their equipment. What type of equipment are they using? Reimbursing them for business expenses. We already talked about that. Record keeping, reporting, meal and rest periods, and workers' comp. And so just to touch on a couple of these, are they on your computer? Are they on your laptop? How secure is it? Do you need a VPN? Did you not have a VPN before? How are you protecting data if you need to protect data in the course of the type of business that you do? We already talked about reimbursing record keeping. How are you tracking time? If they're an hourly employee, how are you keeping track of their time? If they take meal or rest breaks, how are you doing that? How are you keeping track of that? If they have confidential information at home, how are you maintaining that confidentiality? Let's say it's a medical coder and they're coding medical claims. Okay, they're doing that on their dining room table. Okay, well, then now they had friends over for 4th of July. Like, is all of that information sprawled out on that dining room table? What are you, the business owner, doing to protect those records, confidential records potentially, of your clients or the people that you face off to or the work that you do? And lastly, workers' comp. And I had when I spoke to my OSHA contact, we kind of got in a huge debate over this issue. First of all, call your workers' comp carrier. If you're transitioning people that typically worked in the office to a home setting, are they covered? Do you need additional coverage? Do you need to change coverage? Are they covered at their house? And by covered, the other things that concern me as an attorney and somebody that litigates and defends employers is Jane is working at home. She's sitting at her desk and she gets up and trips over her computer cord. Workers' comp? Yeah, I think so. What if she's working and she trips over her dog? Workers' comp? Not really, but she's working. So is she going to argue workers' comp? And here's the bigger one, which I think will happen more and more, but Jane is working from home. Okay, let's use Bob. Bob is working from home and he has to pick his kids up from soccer practice, but he has a Zoom call. And so he decides to take the Zoom call in the car while he's driving to pick his kids up from soccer practice during the day, or camp. And he gets into an accident. Workers' comp? I don't know. What I have done in terms of the handbooks that I've revamped is these are the issues that we're addressing. If you have employees that are working from home, they should be working. If they opt to take a call while they're driving, that's a work call. We have policies that talk about them not being on the phone while they're driving. We have policies that say if they get into an accident and the company is held liable in any way, the company will go back after the employee. If they are ticketed, the company will go after the employee. So these are the things, as you redefine your workplace, that you as an employer need to think about in terms of how differently you are doing business now than you were before. But call that workers' comp carrier and get a good understanding of what's covered and what's not as it relates to moving forward with people working from home. The other issue that I caution you about is I have heard stories. I've heard everything from sitting in bed and working to sitting on the couch and working to using an ironing board as a desk, which I thought was pretty clever, actually, because you can change the height. But at any rate, people working at home are not typically ergonomically correctly set up like they would be in an office. So when you have somebody coming into the office, they have a desk that's the right height, they have a proper chair that is intended to sit at a desk and let them work for hours at a time. They have a keyboard that's the right height so they don't have issues with carpal tunnel and other wrist issues. If they're working at home, are they set up correctly? And if they're not, do you as an employer care about that? And I'm not, no judgment. I just get people that say, that's fine. I'm not really concerned about that. But, you know, look at the long-term impact of that employee working at home. And is it something that I just say to you to flag the issue to say, is it a question worth asking or a conversation worth having with those employees that are going to remain at home? So that's where we are in the work at home front. This is something I address in every seminar I do. And that is, it's been a really tough year for a lot of people. Year and a half, actually, a really tough year. And I have seen and heard and dealt with employers that have tragic stories about their employees. And so in every seminar I do, I say, don't overlook the mental health issues of your employees. Many of them have been, are, or will struggle as a result of the pandemic. And it could be, I just talked to a teacher who left the school over anxiety issues over the past year. She was a wonderful teacher, and has been suffering medical issues as a result. So don't overlook it. Really, really offer solutions to your employees, whether it's some kind of wellness program, whether it's giving them resources, giving them time off. Employees will go the extra mile for you if they know you care about these issues. And here's my little plug for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention in Philadelphia, has a wealth of resources on mental health, not just related to suicide, but just overall mental wellness and mental health that are available free for employers. And if you need those resources, or you need that contact for those resources, or you would like the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention to come in, they're coming into offices and they're doing presentations free for employees. So there's lots of things out there to help business owners. Okay, so kind of to summarize and put this together, reevaluate your workforce as your businesses are opening back up and operating on this, and I hate this word, but this new normal, this coming back to the way things were before, but never to be back the way they were before. Look at permanent telecommuting, but also look at all the pitfalls, look at the wage taxes, whether it's in Philly or other places. There are other municipalities that have wage taxes. I know Newtown does. So look at the wage taxes and what that means in terms of an employer's obligation to collect those wage taxes on behalf of the employee or report them as you change people's locations. Do an employee audit on pay. Are you paying your employees the right amount of money? Are they salaried or hourly, or what should they be? Are they independent contractors and should they be employees? Look at those issues. And I say that to tell you that the Department of Labor will be looking at those issues. So don't come unprepared. Have that stuff ready. Update your handbooks. Look at your leases. If you're giving back space or you're subleasing, or even just with like OSHA talked about, ventilation issues and making sure that your ventilation systems are up to date. As an employee, as a business owner who leases space, I don't think that's my obligation. Did I have a conversation with my landlord about that? Absolutely. But it might be in your lease. So look at that and really evaluate your insurance. Do you have the right insurance for the way you're doing business right now? And I could tell you, I've sent a number of my clients over to an insurance guy that I work with to just say, this is what they have. Do they have the right stuff for this is the way they're operating now? It's worth its weight in gold to do that stuff. And just make sure, like, do your due diligence, do your compliance. My office works very closely with so many businesses doing this kind of compliance, or has relationships with them to say, hey, call us, we'll look at it, and we'll give you a quick answer. And throughout the pandemic, we've also been offering discounted consultations for small businesses to help them. Sometimes you don't need to retain an attorney. Sometimes you don't need to have a long-term relationship, but you do need like half hour just to talk about, these are the issues that I'm having. How do I resolve them? We do that. And we do that at a discounted rate for SCORE members. So if you need that, call us. We're there. We'd rather have you do it right. And then lastly, just I try to the extent I can to post a lot on LinkedIn, but I only post things that are relevant to business owners. So if the new unemployment regulations came out regarding employees going back to work and looking for work, I posted that, and I post it and say, hey, business owners, you need to look at this. Attention, this is why this is important to you. So link in with me if you haven't already. And if you want that information, I also do a blog. I promise I won't kill you. I do a couple a month. But that's the content of my blogs, is just to say, hey, this new regulation came out. Here's why it's relevant and important to you as a business owner. So that is my presentation. I think I'm right on time.
Yes,
Ed,
you are.
how did I do?
Not bad. Actually, quite good. It was excellent presentation, by the way. We have a bunch of questions that you did not answer, but I have one that I find interesting. So you spoke about business expenses, and perhaps we should be compensating people for buying paper and toner and whatnot. And I understand that, and that makes sense. But at the same time, the person's working from home and they no longer have a commuting expense, which they pick up themselves. So do I balance the $20 a day or $5 or $10 a day you save in gasoline and tolls against you buying some of the stuff to work from home? You know what I'm saying? I mean, does it get that fine a line or not really?
I think that there's an argument to be made for that, particularly if you have somebody that commutes a really long way, to say, look, you're not paying for gas anymore. You're not paying for tolls anymore. You're not paying for wear and tear on your car. And I never reimbursed you for that. So there's a savings to you as well. I think that's a completely valid argument to make. And I would say, use that as part of the analysis. And if you're still coming out where your employee's putting out significantly more amount of money, then that's where you look at it and go, maybe I'll give them a little bit.
Yeah, you pick up the spread. And going along with that is a question that's very good. If an employee is driving to work and gets in an accident, is that workman's comp?
No. To and from work is not compensable, and it's not workman's comp. Between work or driving on behalf of work or driving outside of the normal work, that may be workers' comp. So if you normally go to the office and I tell you to go to New York for a trade show, that may be workers' comp.
Here's one that's very interesting. I think your expertise will be needed here. If an employee is in a car accident during a workday, are we responsible, regardless if the travel was work-related, stating that electronic devices were not being used? So I guess somebody hitting them or something like that. That's an interesting question. What would they do it out there if it's not work-related?
And that's exactly the point I was getting to, Ed, is that, if your job is a desk job or something that requires you to stay at home and you're out and you get into an accident, I would say that's not work related. If you go out to get Subway for lunch and come back and get into an accident, I don't think that's work related. You're hungry.
Yeah.
But if it's during your work day and you're on a work call, that's where I think that's again, one of those gaps where I think employers should have a policy that says, no, you can't drive during the work day if your job doesn't require you to do so, and be on the phone. Like, we don't condone driving and texting, driving and phone calls. Mm-mm.
All that stuff's illegal anyway. Not that anybody pays attention, if you notice. So here's one. I think they may have misunderstood, or I might have. So hourly employees are under 35,000 don't fall under the overtime pay. I think they do fall under the overtime pay. They're paid
Yeah, they
under.
do. Let's see if I can go back to that slide. So under the federal regulations, it is 23,000.
Okay.
23,660 per year. But under the state regulations, those levels, even though the federal levels, although they were proposed to increase, I think it was 47 was the proposed increase, that never happened. But what PA did was they said, well, we're going to increase it over the next 3 years, starting in 2020, and we're going to make it $684 a week or $35,000 a year. So if you have an employee that is salaried, making under $35,000 a year, and they work over 40 hours a week, they need to be bumped up if they're legitimately a salaried employee, or you need to start paying them overtime as an hourly employee. So that's the threshold, but you have to also look at what their job function is. Like, for example, in this picture, this woman's a cashier. She is truly an hourly employee. That would be an hourly position. So if I'm paying her at a salary and I'm saying, okay, you're working as a salary and I pay you $30,000 a year, then she needs to be paid overtime, because now she falls between that gap of 23 and 35.
Now, here's one. You talked about the gig economy, and there's an awful lot of people who I notice drive Amazon trucks and they drive FedEx trucks, and they're really not Amazon or FedEx employees. They're private contractors. How does that work in the world of overtime and everything else? I contract with FedEx to run a truck to deliver their packages. And is there, you know what I'm saying? That seems to me like, while it may not be, I should say, it is prevalent in those businesses. How have you handled that?
So those companies have been sued 6 ways to Sunday. FedEx has been sued. One of the litigations that I think it was in California. I think it was in the independent country of California. They were sued for like $684 million or something. And basically the judge says, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck. And I think that was in the opinion, but literally the judge said, they drive your trucks, wear your uniforms, drive your schedule. You tell them where to go, when to be there, when to pick up, when to drop off, what their hours are. They are not independent. They are misclassified, and they are employees. Now with the Uber drivers, those lawsuits have been filed too. And I think the court in those cases found that they were independent. I'm not really sure, because there's been a lot of lawsuits about that. So I would say, if you're taking a conservative approach, these people are not independent of you, particularly if they're working 35, 40 hours a week for you.
Right.
And you're telling them where to go.
Uber drivers, it's a business where you can accept or not accept a call, and you're using your vehicle, and there are a lot of other extenuating circumstances. But a guy wearing your uniform driving your truck, it's kind of
on your schedule, has to be at a certain place at a certain time. Yeah.
It's on. Now here's one that's interesting. You didn't address this, but
I didn't see this. They scrolled down. I was like, no more questions.
Go up and down. Do these thresholds, the ones that you have on the screen, apply to nonprofits as well? Because they don't have any money to begin with. So
I believe that they do, but I will look, because now I want to know the answer to that. So Ed, I will look that up for you, and you could send it out when you send out the slides.
Oh, okay. You'll address that to Charlie, and he
Yep.
handles
Okay. All right. Charlie,
Yeah.
I'll send you an email on that.
it's a whole nother economy, the nonprofits, and growing. So I bet eventually you will get questions like that. When you were talking about all the vaccinated and not vaccinated, are you running into a lot of potential litigation about that, where the employer is asking people, and it's not religious or the other related, it's just they don't want to get it for whatever reason. So if you don't want to get it and everybody else is vaccinated, they don't want to work with you and you don't want to work with them. What do you do about all that? I mean,
these issues from the litigation standpoint are so new. And so we haven't seen a whole lot of lawsuits come through the courts on them. We're just starting to see the lawsuits about workers' comp and COVID come through, people that get COVID through work, and most of those are failing. So the vaccine issues are so new, and that's why I raised that one case. If any of the people on the call want to check it out, it was a case that came down in the federal courts in Texas. That it was a healthcare system. It was a hospital system, and they were mandating vaccines. And there was a whole group of employees that filed a lawsuit saying that they weren't getting the vaccines and they were wrongfully terminated because they didn't get the vaccines. And they didn't have a qualifying reason. And the court said that they didn't have a case, like that the case was dismissed. So we haven't seen a lot, but we find that litigation lags so far behind the actual events. So it takes a while to move through the system, and the courts are just starting to open up again. They've been closed too, where I'm just starting to have in-person things in court, but a lot of it's even still online.
When you're looking at summer employees, which is now, actually, you mentioned it, kind of the salvation for a lot of companies, kids who are, college is out and high school is about to be out. And so they're all looking for jobs and getting them. How do you classify them? And B, what do you do about this medical thing? Because there's age limits on the vaccine and all that other stuff. What are you seeing there?
It's interesting. I haven't seen that question come up. I have seen questions about, Pennsylvania, which is a little different than in New Jersey. You can be 14 and get working papers. I think in New Jersey it's 16. So, I think some employers who normally wouldn't take a 14-year-old, they're taking them because they so need people. And I did hear a lot about the shore. Now, I haven't been down the shore yet, but they are so hurting for workers as well, because a lot of the workers that worked like on the boardwalk and things were foreign people that came over for the summer on visas. And there's still a lot of prohibitions to international travel. So, they're really hurting for workers as well. But I haven't seen a whole lot with children and mandating vaccines. And I think part of that is because people see that as a really personal choice, whether or not to get their children vaccinated. But also the statistics are showing that there's there were so few amount of COVID children's cases as opposed to adult cases, and the severity was so minimal compared to adult cases.
Right. I'll tell you, I do stuff at a place that called Ship and Print, and it's basically, one of those UPS drop-offs, FedEx, all that, and they print stuff. And the guy has hired a number of high school students who are extremely savvy with the computer. And it's,
Yeah.
1,000 times more than I'd ever be in my whole lifetime, whatever was left. And that's where it's going also. A lot of those type students or high school kids that work after school because of the way they're doing school. Now, have you had any cases in which people are saying, well, I'm hiring all of these younger people. They're going to be here for a while. They're almost like gig economy because they're after school for a couple of hours and then not. Has there been questions about how you pay these people and what kind of benefits they get? or not?
No, I haven't seen that. I mean, I do know that there are very strict laws about hiring minors and the amount of hours that they work. So I always caution employers, to the extent that you are, bringing on minors that you normally wouldn't because you just need workers. Look at there's a limit on the amount of hours that they can work. There are limits on how late they can work, how many hours a day they can work. And there's also, you have to be very careful with minors that you don't drop them below the minimum wage. And by that, I mean, if you're not paying them for all the hours, or you're making them run errands or something, or they're not putting in all their time, that they could fall below that threshold. But I also know that there are places like Sesame Place that are paying their kids $13 an hour to work rides because they need the people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's actually a real boom, at least temporarily. For all
Yeah.
well, we're pretty much at our appointed time, and we have run out of questions. So I'm going to say thank you so much, and I'm going to turn it back to Linda. Linda?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Ed. Christina, what a wealth of information, and a topic that I'm sure every day changes. So I would encourage all of the folks who attended this seminar, if they need more information, to get in touch with you, connect with you on LinkedIn, because this isn't a topic that's a one and done for sure. It's something that have to stay on top of, so that you don't get in trouble with the government. Nobody wants that.
Right.
I thank you so much for all of this, for the hard work you put together in getting this to us. We appreciate it. We look forward to having you at a future event. Ed, thanks for all your help getting our wonderful speakers, Christina being one of them, and all of you who have attended. Don't forget about SCORE. If you need us, or if you want to help us, you can also volunteer and become one of us. We welcome all of you. Just visit our website at buckscounty.score.org. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.
Bye.